Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome back to Football Discussions. And today we have a very special video for you. We're going to be doing our Broncos offseason preview with none other than a very special guest, Benjamin Allbright. He is the host of Broncos Country tonight on KOA Colorado. Thank you for coming on today, Benjamin.
Oh, no problem, man. Anytime.
All right, so I feel like as a Broncos fan myself, and I'm sure you are too, the number one question that I feel like divides Broncos fans right now heading into this offseason is what to do with the quarterback situation. Is Drew Lock the future? So just before we get started, like, what's your overall opinion on Drew Lock? Do you still have faith in him at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, I have faith that he's got the tools and the makeup to become something really good. The question is whether or not he's going to get the time to become that guy. It's the NFL is a pretty what have you done for me now kind of league, and with Drew, he showed improvement over the final 6 games, but he definitely wasn't where he needed to be last year for this team to win. So that's why they're kind of out there looking and seeing what the other options are. I think if they give him another chance, he could grow into that. I do believe that, but again, he's a guy that's going to take a little bit longer, and fans are just not very patient.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of becoming a fan determined situation where it's more of the fans want a new answer rather than the front office. And obviously, new GM coming in and Peyton could change things because he doesn't necessarily have that loyalty to Drew that John Elway might, due to the fact that John Elway drafted him. But before we get into what to do with the quarterback position, I just want to go over, sorry about that, some of the big re-signings that could happen for the Denver Broncos this offseason. So obviously there's some guys that are going to be free agents, and I feel like the biggest one right now is Justin Simmons. What are your thoughts? Do you think the Broncos bring back Simmons?
I do. I think that. Oops, sorry, as I try to fix all this. I think that's their plan right now. Is just to bring back Justin. I can tell you with the contract negotiations last year that the Broncos were close to a long-term deal. They just, Justin had a number in mind and they didn't get there. So, I think they want to. Justin wants to be in Denver. I think they want to get it done. The question is whether or not they're willing to meet that number. And like I said, they were close last year. So I at this point, I expect Justin Simmons to be back in a Broncos uniform, but there's still some hoops to jump through, and things can always fall apart.
Yeah, all right. And what about another, I would say, fan favorite for the Denver Broncos, Shelby Harris? No one's better at batting down the football than Shelby. Gets after the quarterback a bit and disrupts the run game as well. So do you think the Broncos value Shelby? Obviously, we got him for a steal last year. Where do you think their heads are at right now in the process of re-signing Shelby?
I think the priority is Justin, but they've got some framework in place for Shelby, and they do want to resign him. Last year, it was a little bit different setup. Shelby wanted to test the free agent market, and had some teams that were interested at a much higher price point than what he paid for. But the problem is that Shelby wanted to go to contender. He just want to go somewhere for the money. So he nixed the Cincinnati Bengals, who went on to sign DJ Reader. And then Shelby, had a sort of been talking to the Colts, and I think he was counting on that deal. And then the Colts traded for DeForest Buckner, and that took them out of the market. Then all of a sudden he had nowhere to go. So the Broncos would just given him just a little throwaway offer that they didn't expect him to take. He came back and took that offer, which actually shocked the Broncos. They weren't even the night that went down. The Broncos weren't even aware. They had forgotten that they'd given him that offer. It's funny. It was a funny way that kind of played out in the end. But, Shelby came back. He loves it here in Denver. I think he'd like to stay. I think they can work something out. But the priority right now is Justin and then Shelby.
Yeah, obviously Justin, one of the best safeties in the NFL, and then, like I said about Shelby, kind of a fan favorite that I'd say a lot of Broncos fans want to bring back. But let's transition from re-signing guys to maybe letting some guys go, some guys that maybe aren't at the end of their contract. I think someone like AJ Bouye has been mentioned that he could be cut, and then of course, Hall of Famer most likely, Super Bowl MVP Von Miller could be on his way out this offseason. So, do you see those two guys not being Broncos next year?
I think Bouye is a lot less likely to be a Bronco than Bond. Jarrell Casey as well. I think that they kind of serve their purpose, but in the end, you didn't really get a lot of production out of them. There's no guaranteed money. You can just get rid of that and kind of move from there. I think Bond's going to be back. I do, for one more season, and we'll see. I think the Broncos ideally would like to extend him on, take that team option from this year, extend him for a couple of years, and pay that out over a couple of seasons. I don't know that that's going to happen. Von has kind of, wanted to get back to Texas a little bit. So maybe he tries to take some money from like the Texans or something. But right now they have a team option. The team's got to decide what they're going to do with and go from there. I suspect Von will be with the Broncos next year.
All right. As a Broncos fan, I love to hear that. Obviously, one of the best players to ever play for the organization. But let's move on to probably the most talked about conversation with the Denver Broncos this offseason, and that is the quarterback conversation, which we touched on a bit earlier. Obviously, some people had us in the mix for Matthew Stafford. So before I ask you about anything else, was there ever a realistic opportunity or chance that the Broncos were going to ever trade for Matthew Stafford?
I guess that depends on how you view the term realistic. They had a price point and they offered a first and a third for Matt Stafford and the Lions' second back. And that was, compared to what they got, that's a low ball offer. That's what the Broncos felt was fair. So, realistically, no, because that wasn't even in the top three offers that the Lions got. But to say that they weren't involved isn't exactly, fair or honest either. They were involved. They just weren't involved at the level that teams like Carolina, Washington, or ultimately the Rams were. So Carolina offered the number 8 overall pick. So it was the Broncos were never going to do that. They were never going to trade 9 for Stafford straight up. When the Lions countered that deal, they had countered with a first and a third and Locke and Judy and another player, which we believe is Draymond Jones, but we don't know for sure. And the Broncos just said no at that point. So the Broncos' plan with Matt Stafford was actually to keep Drew Lock. And what you would do is you would start Matt Stafford, allow Drew Lock to develop behind him for 2 seasons, and then when Stafford's contract is up, you have a decision to make. Do you extend Matt Stafford at that point, or is Drew Lock developed enough that you can sign him probably to a cheaper deal and go from there? So that was the plan with Matt Stafford. Now, ultimately they weren't super serious about it. It didn't work out. That's that. With if they were to be in on Deshaun Watson, that's a big if. They would be willing to move Drew Lock for a Deshaun Watson. The difference in that scenario is that Matt Stafford's 33 years old and Deshaun Watson is 25, and so that's why there's a difference between those two. I don't think the Broncos are going to be as in on Deshaun Watson as people think. I think they'll put a low ball offer out there, and that's probably about it. I don't think they can compete with the Dolphins or Jets on this, but we'll see. Stranger things have happened, and you got to at least try, right?
Yeah, I would love to get my hands on Deshaun, but obviously for the right price as a Broncos fan. And it's interesting because I feel like the narrative that came out after the Stafford and after Stafford went to LA, and there was some rumors that came out about what the Broncos offered. I think the report said that Peyton wasn't interested in giving up the young core, and that kind of hinted at Drew Lock. So I feel like a few Broncos fans were just mad that Peyton wouldn't trade Drew Lock for Stafford, but I had no idea Judy was involved in there too. And obviously that's just way too much for a 32-year-old quarterback, in my opinion, at least. So again, it's an interesting narrative that people pinned on Peyton that he valued Drew over Stafford, but there was a lot of players in that young core, including the first round draft pick from last year, Jerry Jeudy. So you touched on Deshaun. We talked about Stafford. And then I saw one of your tweets earlier. I think it was either today or yesterday, but you mentioned Dak's name. So you said you don't have to give up the value for him, but you just have to pay the man. So do you think it's realistic if Dak hits free agency that the Broncos could be one of those top 3 contenders to get him?
Well, yes, but let me back up just a little bit there, because the Dak thing is something I think people weren't paying attention to the time frame on. The Dak thing would actually happen after this coming season. The Cowboys are going to franchise tag Dak Prescott again. If you're a Broncos fan, you don't want them to get a deal done, because then they won't be able to use the franchise tag again. He'll hit free agency, and then you can pursue him. I can tell you that during his draft, he was the next quarterback on the Broncos board. If Jerry Jones had traded up for Paxton Lynch like he wanted to, then the Broncos would have taken Dak Prescott in the second round, and this would all be a moot point. So I can tell you the Broncos were very high on Dak coming out. They liked him a lot. The DUI at the end there scared them off a little bit, but in the end, I think that they were incredibly high on him. They would be in pursuit of him, and I would think that Dak Prescott would be interested. I can't see any reason he wouldn't be. I don't, but this would be next season because they're going to franchise him again. You're not going to have the opportunity this season, and that's what I've been trying to tell people. So there's a lot of people out there that think that Drew Lock sucks, and fair. If that's your opinion, cool. But what I'm saying is like, if Drew Lock sucks so bad, if we roll with him for another season, then you're going to be in position to either draft a quarterback or get Dak Prescott or Matt Ryan, both of whom are going to hit the market next year, and go from there. Or if I'm right and Drew Lock is good, then Drew Lock becomes good. We don't have to worry about that, and we can take those draft picks and that money and put it other places. So to me, it's a win-win to run it back with Drew Lock. I know some people aren't happy with the guy. I know some people and all this kind of stuff. But if you think about the future of the franchise long term, you don't need to be all in on Deshaun Watson to solve the quarterback situation this year. You give it one more year with Drew Lock, and you're right back in the situation where you can look at Dak Prescott, which I was bringing up, or Matt Ryan, or draft pick, or all the above next year.
Yeah. And so just a hypothetical to throw your way, because it's definitely very much a hypothetical right now. But obviously, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert are two of the best AFC West quarterbacks. Let's say Derek Carr, for whatever reason, there were some rumors about him being on the move, gets a blockbuster trade with Deshaun Watson. And then you have Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert all in this division in the AFC West. How much pressure does that add on the Broncos to go out and get a quarterback that's not named Drew Lock?
I don't know if it puts a lot of pressure on you to get that quarterback. It just puts a lot of pressure on you to find other ways to win. Football's a team game. Matter of fact, when the Broncos won the Super Bowl 50, I think they had the worst quarterback in the division in Peyton Manning. And it's not the first time that's happened. I mean, we can go back and look at quarterbacks that have been the worst quarterbacks in their division. You go back and look at Rex Grossman, and then went to a Super Bowl with the Bears. Of course, they lost to Peyton Manning in that one. Trent Dilfer with the Ravens. He was terrible. Brad Johnson with the Bucks. He was terrible. We see it every once in a while. You got to have a great defense to do it. So I think if you're the Broncos, you want to find a quarterback that's capable of scoring points. But this idea that you have to have the best quarterback in the division doesn't necessarily equate to a Super Bowl. You want to have the best team in the division and a quarterback good enough to compete.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let's move on from the quarterback conversation and talk about building up the rest of this team. I feel like whether it's in free agency and we can get into the draft as well, the Broncos need to make a move on defense, especially for a corner. It feels like right now we desperately need help in the secondary. Obviously, Fangio's scheme is very good, and it's always going to produce a somewhat good defense, but you need good players in it. Linebackers, another position of need, maybe interior defensive line as well. So before we get into the draft, let's start off with this free agency class. Is there anyone that strikes you as, a must get for the Broncos once this free agency period opens?
I don't know about must get, but there's definitely going to be some opportunities, especially with the Saints needing to shed serious salary cap space. They're like 115 million over the salary cap. So they're going to have to shed some things. It's one or two of those corners make sense because they're so deep at the corner position. So there might be an opportunity for a value move there, specifically with their corners. I don't know if there's a must-get guy. Everybody's going to talk about the top names and say this, that, and the other. But in the end, Vic Fangio's scheme just relies on guys that can tackle and can keep the play in front of them. They don't have to be the best athlete or the best corner in the world. They just got to be a guy that tackles well and keeps the play in front of them. And then the safeties kind of make the ball hawks in his defense. So I don't think that if it's me, I'm not 100% that I'm looking at free agency for a corner. Probably going back to the draft and probably doing it pretty early. Whether you like Farley out of Vatek or whether you like Patrick Surtain out of Alabama, any of those guys, I think you go to the draft because you drafted a couple guys last year. You still got Bryce Callahan. I think that's the direction you probably look.
Yeah, and I make mock drafts on this YouTube as well. And in the past few, I've mocked either Farley or Surtain. So I was going to ask you about those two guys. Obviously, Farley coming out, opted out. So don't have the tape on him from this year. He produced very well in his sophomore season. And then Surtain obviously played this year and played very, very good football at that cornerback position like everyone expected him to. So in Fangio's scheme, obviously, Farley presents, I personally, I think more scheme versatility. Do you think that the Broncos will end up going Farley or Surtain?
I don't know if they'll go with either. I think they'll look at all their options. I think they're going to be looking at inside linebacker as well. I think ideally they would trade back out of 9 and try to get somebody to fall in their lap and then multiply the draft picks so that if they're going into the draft next year needing a quarterback, they've got the ammunition to move up. And if not, they've kind of built the war chest to kind of keep that rolling forward for future years. So, I feel like that's probably the direction that they're going to go. But there's some other corners too in the middle routes that aren't bad. Guys like Melifonwu out of Syracuse. I mean, he's a lengthy, rangy guy who plays that way, plays the style they like. So I think there are options There's certainly options out there. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. It's still a little bit early to kind of know those kinds of things, but I would not be surprised if that's the general direction they went.
Yeah, obviously a lot to look forward to for the Denver Broncos this offseason. A lot of players that they could bring back, a lot of changes that are going to happen. But thank you, Benjamin, for coming on today. I had a blast talking to you, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
All right, take it easy, guys. Peace.